Hey guys, welcome back to the Pels Pals podcast. It's PJ and I in front of the lenses again today. And today we're going to talk about what equipment and other items you may need when you're getting into birding. We are at Murrayvale where my birding journey, I think, started getting serious around 2016. I made my first trip to Murrayvale when I decided to do a big birding year. That 2016, I recorded, I think, 200 species. Before that, I wasn't really keeping a list. So we wanted to maybe just get into, what it takes to get into birding, maybe describe some of the costs, some of the equipment you may need, and some of the alternatives to, jumping right in and spending R500,000.
Wow.
So I think PJ, one of the first things I think I got was a bird book, and PJ's holding the Sasol Birds of Southern Africa. I worked for Sasol, obviously, so I got the book on discount for $230. But I think, PJ, what are some of the other sort of bird identification things you will use, including books and apps and things like that?
Yeah, so I think when you start birding specifically, generally you're looking around and you're like, oh, cool, I want to start this journey. What do I need to actually start birding? Someone asked me this recently, and I told them you don't need a lot of things. Firstly, you just need your eyes, to be honest, which is free, right? You just need to be looking outside, looking for birds, and you'll be able to see them, right? But I think the first thing that you probably would want to get, and it actually wasn't the first thing I got when I started birding, was probably a pair of binoculars.
Okay.
I think a pair of binoculars is probably the best tool you can have. You don't have to get the best. You don't have to get Swarovskis out of the box, right? You can literally get any pair of binos just so that you can start seeing the birds a lot more clearly and being able to identify specific features. But there's also very specific binos people try to get also. There's the 10 by 42s, the 8 by 42s. Maybe you can give some insight on the differences between the two.
Yeah, so I've got 8 by 42s, Pentax 8 by 42 binos that I've been using almost all my birding life. I bought them store damaged, so the box was damaged.
Yeah.
So I got them at a discount as well. And I paid, I think, 2,500 Rand at the time to get them. I didn't have binos before that. This would have been somewhere between starting birding and halfway in because I realized that I was birding more with my camera and the lens than with actual binos, and then I got the binos. So 8 by 42s, let me explain maybe. The 8 is the magnification, so it magnifies 8 times, and then the 42s is how big the lens on the far side basically is. The bigger that 42 number is, so you can get 8 by 50s, for example, the more light it lets in, and the better you can see birds, basically. But with the bigger element, and so taking that 42 to 50, or taking the 8 to maybe 10 times magnification, what happens is the binos get heavier and harder to carry around. So a lot of the time that we are birding, we are out for long days. We trekking through forest or across grassland and stuff like that. And a heavy set of binoculars is going to be a lot to carry around.
Yeah.
Anything to add there, PJ?
I think also from when I bought my first pair of binos, so I have the Nikon Monarchs. Some of the guys
Also
that I
8
was,
by 42.
Also 8 by 42, the Monarch 5.
Yeah.
Also bought store damaged because the box was damaged, but it was brand new.
Yeah.
So got a discount. So people need to know, try and get them discounts. But yeah, I think someone also mentioned to me that 8 by 42s are generally, I guess, clearer. And because obviously you probably have to walk closer to the birds and stuff like that to see them versus obviously if they're tens, you can obviously see further, but I think over time, like there's a lot more distortion.
Yeah, there's a lot more
of the
air
bird.
between you and the bird. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's the only thing I would really add to the binos. So I definitely think it's a essential tool.
Yeah.
And I was very similar to you when I started. I used to use my camera because I had a DSLR back then, and I just used to pretty much bird with my camera.
Yeah. Take a picture and
ID afterwards.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where what you mentioned in the beginning now, where the books and the apps come in.
Yeah.
Because I think that's probably going to be one of the most essential things for you to firstly identify, but also learn the birds, learn behavior. So like you mentioned, the Sassel book, there's apps also. So we have a whole episode on apps also, which is, I think, we'll link it somewhere on the screen.
I think it'll be here.
It'll be there. Okay, cool. And then, so definitely go check that out in terms of apps. But I think you definitely get essentials is going to be binos and some way to identify the birds, maybe learn some behavior and also figure out like distribution of where the birds are.
Yeah.
But then I think at that point is when it maybe starts to get to the next level. So I would say intermediate expenses for birding. And I think the next thing I guess would say camera.
Whereas like both of us already had cameras and got into birding afterwards. But if you are starting off knowing you want to get into birding, a camera becomes quite a good tool to have, because having a picture is always going to help you later to identify the bird.
Exactly.
Especially with like, we were standing on the water earlier on and we saw a curlew sandpiper, which was a new bird for me. I think PJ had it already, but PJ quickly took a snap that we can reference later. We identified it eventually on the bridge, but you know, if we didn't identify it, we can go back and even post it to like Facebook groups where they will help you identify.
Yeah, no,
and maybe that leads into the next point, which is use your community, use the communities that are established in you know, helping with your birding journey. I think even before I got my book, I would see like barbets in my garden or amethyst sunbird, and what I would do is describe it to a friend who was already a birder, and then they would give me feedback and say, oh, maybe it's this bird or maybe it's that bird, without having the books or the apps or anything at the time. So I think the birding community becomes a good tool to have. And I mean, when PJ and I are birding, PJ will check me on my identifications. So we've got a smaller community as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I think just to go back quickly on the cameras, I think there's different types of cameras. A lot of people, when they also get into birding, is those bridge cameras with like the ultra super zoom. I think those are probably a lot more affordable to kind of like, I mean, I don't know. I actually don't know what the prices of a bridge camera. Maybe you should look it up and put it here and be like, maybe not affordable.
But I think for the range you get on one of those zoom lenses, those super zoom lenses, and the picture quality you're getting, the price you're paying may be a little bit more than an entry-level DSLR used to be.
Yeah.
But you don't have to buy multiple lenses, whereas with the DSLR, you keep adding lenses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, definitely agree with that point. And then, I definitely agree on the communities. It definitely helps to join some groups, figure out, and then, try and use your books and stuff like that. And then if we had to take a further step, we would potentially, the next item I would say is that you probably need like a scope. I think a scope helps in certain situations. We forgot the scope this morning, so, I forgot the scope.
PJ has a scope.
Yeah, so the scope helps in certain situations, mostly shorebirds, maybe grasslands. Where else is a scope, would you say a scope is useful?
So when you're on wetlands like this and, you know, something's far away on the distant bank, a scope could help. I think with the scope, setting it up and then looking through it, the bird has to be not moving very fast.
Yeah.
So it has to be relatively slow moving, and obviously it's going to be, a scope is going to give you 50 times, 60 times the
60 times,
magnification, whereas your binos are giving you 8 times the magnification. So birds that are very far away, or very small birds that may be a bit closer, but it will help if they're not moving very fast, because that scope needs to be stable and on a tripod like we've got our cameras on today.
Yeah.
And then, moving it around and repositioning the scope becomes a little bit of time consuming. So, you want the bird relatively, not fast moving.
Yeah, like just a raptor in a tree very far, but like you'll actually be able to get an eye on it.
A good ID, yeah.
And I mean, even the scopes these days, they have these like little clamps that you can put your phone on for, like, I think they call them digiscoping or something. And then you can pretty much go and take a photo also, attaching
With your
phone.
camera.
Exactly.
A phone camera, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that is pretty much the list of things, and they're all in different categories depending on what type of birding you're kind of like doing. If you're doing some garden birding, I think you can get like binoculars that they don't need to see very far.
Yeah.
But I think once you start going into like the forests and all of those type of things, you want a good pair of binos that can gather enough light, like you say, like 8x42s, or even some of the others that are there. But yeah, any last points on getting into birding?
You can get in very cheaply. I mean, like PJ said, and maybe I mentioned as well, when you get in, you possibly, you exploring the hobby, so you maybe don't want to outlay as much. But I think what you must also try and keep in mind is that you'd want to upgrade to better equipment as you go along. I mean, I'm standing with my camera and the 300mm f2.8 lens with a converter on it, which is, very good for bird photography, but maybe too much for just when you're starting off. But getting a good camera system, if you get in early, you can then expand into that as you get more into the hobby. So I think the advice for me is, once you start getting into it, think about where this journey is going, and maybe then allow for that incremental upgrade as you go along.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I think even with things like the books, you can get a basic identification book like the Sasol book, which is going to cost you $500. But then you can get specialist books for identifying LBJs, for instance, or, birds in this province that we're in, birds of Gauteng, where it'll give you spots to go to and then further tips on the birding as well. So, even you think that, once you've spent the money on the book, that's it. But
it can go further. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think definitely something that you just mentioned to end this off is, like, there is a big difference between bird photography and birding photography, and maybe we should make a video on that. Because I think, like, obviously most of the time birding photography is just a record shot to identify.
Yes.
And then there's, I guess, the whole world of like bird photography, and just spending 6 days to try and get one shot and like try and get in the perfect habitat and all of those type of things. And we can definitely go down.
Yeah, I think I think you inevitably go down the route, because
eventually
the birds you're seeing, you fall in love with them eventually, and you want to get those good pictures of them. I mean, you eventually start upgrading your cameras, and it's I think it's a journey. So you start at a point that may be cheaper to get in, less capital outlay, but as you go along, you're gonna have to spend that money.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess that's it from us. If you have any other suggestions of things that people need for birding or how to get started in birding, definitely put in the comments below, and we will catch you on the next podcast episode. Peace.